Thanks again for coming today. I know everybody that's presenting really appreciates your time out of your busy day. And before I begin, I'd like to thank a few people. They've been thanked. I know it's a little redundant, but personally they've had influence in me and impact on my degree. I can only imagine what it would be like having a student come to your class or your room every semester and have a different idea what they want to do with their degree. And imagine planning that out for 4 years. So thank you, Ms. Carrie Souter, who's been my advisor the whole time at INDS. And again, the director, Ms. Patricia Lanew. Without you beating up everything I've done and your criticism, I could not have come together with something as great as I have. And I do truly appreciate it. It's in the best way. So without further ado, I'll get started. What I want to do is I want to have a little exercise where if the answer to the yes is to my question, I want you guys to stand up just for me real briefly, and then we'll sit down at the end of the questions. The first question is if you know what non-renewable energy sources are. All right. Now, if the next question is yes, I want you to raise your hand. If not, just stay standing. So, does anybody here know what solar and geothermal energy is? All right. And your left hand, so you're really great if you know this too. No, you can keep your right hands up if you have the answer. The left hand is now if you have solar or geothermal installed on a home in your family or that you personally own. You can stay standing. Nothing to be proud of.
Now you're beating me up.
All right, great. So everybody can put their hands there. You guys can sit down. I just want to have an idea. That's really what my project was on. I focused on the residential sector, and I'll go into a little more detail of why I did that and some of my findings. But it's interesting to know, even in the room, you guys statistically are a lot higher in what you know about the topic. So we'll go into a little more detail, but you guys are pretty knowledgeable. So as my degree, Ms. Lanew already said, it's entitled Renewable Energies and the Residential Sector. Really what that means is that I'm looking at homes, so individual homes. I'm not looking into companies or anything corporate or federal. I'm really just looking at the individual and their personal home. We really looked at middle class specifically in my research, but it extends farther than that. And what's the problem? What's the reasoning behind me wanting to look into this topic, and why isn't it being covered anywhere else? So why research this for a whole semester? And really, I have a background in the industry. My father owns a custom homes company, or he constructs homes, and he's been doing it for about 15 years. So I've been involved in the industry, and never once have we installed a home with this technology, even in this year. So it's surprising to me, because in the academic field, I see that it just seems to make sense. So I always ask the question, why? Why aren't people doing this now if it just makes so much sense? And the answer between disciplines are different. So we really run into INDS where I need to bring these together to get an answer that makes sense and that integrates all the concepts between the disciplines, which I'll talk about in a minute. So my formal question is, what are the benefits and limitations to utilizing renewable energies, specifically solar and geothermal, because there's quite a few, but those are the two most relevant to residential properties, for residential housing, for the consumer, and the environment. Because what we found is, financially, the decisions that make the most sense for your wallet don't make the most sense for the environment. And the reverse is true. The best decisions for the environment aren't financially viable most times. So how can we bring these guys together? So I did this through a few methodologies. Case study analysis was critical. We looked at not only in the state or in Maryland, but across the country where some of these technologies have been implemented at a local level in individuals' houses, as well as some big developments, but still residential housing just integrated at the beginning when they were first built. Literature reviews are also critical, as well as informal interviews. I know a lot of industry professionals in the solar industry particularly, and a few in the geothermal, that really helped guide me in my research and direct me to find the information that I needed. And my strategies for integration. I know I mentioned that there are a handful of disciplines that I used, but primarily I used environmental studies and business management, along with quite a bit of finance, which falls in with business quite a bit, because these disciplines tend not to interact very well together. One that works well financially doesn't work environmentally, as I mentioned previously. And there's a lot of times that there's a disconnect that causes for decisions not to get made or to be made incorrectly. So I wanted to redefine some terms wealth, sustainability, net benefit are just to name a few. Wealth in a business sense could be, a net benefit in your bank account. So you make more money, or you see a return on your investment sooner, or whatever the case may be. And in environmental studies, we can look at that benefit as biodiversity in the ecosystem, or the wealth or the cleanliness of streams and the environment in general. So a lot of times these terms need to come and be redefined together. So wealth could mean sustainability, integrate that in with wealth to understand that going into the future that the environment plays a huge role in finance, and the reverse. Without the two, they need to interact at every stage. So what did I find? Well, when I first started the project, I thought it was going to be pretty simple. I would walk in here and I'd be able to say, everybody should do solar and geothermal. Just period, it's great technologies, plug it into your house, and we solve the problem. But first what I'll do is I'll run through what they are in case you guys aren't sure. Even though I'm preliminary, you guys seem to understand pretty much what non-renewables are. But renewables tend to be a little more difficult and people aren't as knowledgeable in them. Solar energy is a source, it's a technology that uses energy from the sun and converts it for use. A lot of times it's for electricity. Sometimes it can be for hot water heaters or other things. But in a home, typically hot water or electricity. And geothermal is a little different. They work with HVAC systems, which just means heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, so the heat or the cooling in your house. What this technology does is it uses the difference in the temperature of the earth. Pretty simple. It's just imagine some pipes in the ground, and that the change from the temperature at the top to the bottom allows it to cool your house with a little bit of pump and water or some kind of substance through it. But the great thing about geothermal is that it's really an out of sight, out of mind technology. Once it's installed, the pump's put away, you don't see the pump, the pipes are in the ground, and if they're installed correctly, you can see a lifespan of over 100 years, sometimes longer. A lot of times they outlive the house. So, back to my original question, what I thought was, what are the benefits to utilizing both of these technologies, and what are the costs? Because people need to know, how's it going to affect my bottom dollar? And what I found was, there's a ton of incentives for these technologies. At the federal level, there's a grant for 30% of the total cost right off the bat of the system. There used to be a cap in 2009 on solar, which was removed, and the program's been extended to 2016, which is huge. 30% is a major, major discount, and it allows payback periods, which is just the time that you see your money back that you put in to break even, to be right around 10 years, 8 to 10 years. Some have seen sooner, depending on the site, and some longer, but right around 10 years. And the environmental benefits are huge because you use site resources and renewable resources. And renewable, the difference between renewable and non-renewable is that renewables can be replenished at the same rate that they're used, instead of non-renewables such as oil that we use now that we're using at a rate much faster than they can be replenished. So not only do we use less of this, we produce less CO2, less greenhouse gases, less NOx emissions across the board. So with these incentives, like I said, we see payback periods of about 10 years. The problem was that I asked, and the question came right away, was, do you see the money back when you invest in your house? Because a lot of people want to know if you put whatever the value be. These systems typically run between $25,000 and $30,000. Does that increase the value of your house by 30 grand? And the answer that I found was no. A lot of times it's not. Sometimes it even decreases the value of your house. So if you're looking as a homeowner and just looking for your wallet, a lot of times these payback periods, you have to be willing to put in the time for your payback period in your home to see the financial benefit. Although there's an environmental, it really depends on where your values are if you were to implement these technologies. But what my research led me to was another alternative to these technologies that I didn't consider at first. And that's in efficiency. So we look at renewable energies, but a quote by Matt Golden, founder of Sustainable Spaces, really stuck with me through my whole research. And it's no matter how you cut this, it's always better to reduce than to produce. So our renewable energies are great, and they add energy or supplement energy, but we're still consuming the same. So although it changes our portfolio of how we get our energy, it's still way higher than it could be. So dollar for dollar, there's a lot better ways to spend the money. Even initially, and I can't say that solar or geothermal wasn't better, but for the money, CFL bulbs, efficiency and insulation, and things like that tend to save you a lot more money, and you see payback periods a lot closer to 5 years. So like I said, there's a bunch of alternatives to solar and geothermal, and they all have their part. But in conclusion, what I found was solar and geothermal aren't the only answer. They are definitely a part of the answer, but not the only. They play a major part in our portfolio of the future. They're still expensive, but through efficiency and different technology rises, they're becoming much more affordable. Energy efficiency, as I mentioned on the last slide, is also critical. We're going to see a lot of that coming into the future, so we use less and save more. But there's also technologies that are going to see non-renewables much farther into the future. So we need to understand these technologies, and we need to understand what they can do for us. The costs are high, but between the two disciplines, what we can see is that there is a net benefit even now for all the technologies, including efficiency. Any questions?
So Eric, could you review for us the contributions of the main disciplinary perspectives that you had to draw from to do this analysis? And were there any disciplinary perspectives you wish could have contributed to, but maybe you didn't have the expertise or the time?
Sure. So the two main disciplines that I found were environmental studies and business management. And there were a lot of disconnects, which is why this project came together. So in some of my environmental studies classes, we would have suggestions from teachers or theories for projects that cost hundreds of millions of dollars that just didn't make financial sense, and I have a part of me that just on the financial side always leveraged away from it. So they both contributed. Environmental studies really had the best idea of what to do for the environment. They have a lot of background, that's their focus, so they can help in a major way towards business to make decisions that make sense. So those disciplines just work real well together. Business oftentimes forgets the externalities of non-renewable energy sources, so they don't take into account CO2 emissions and NOx emissions and the degradation of environments and loss of biodiversity. And if I were to include other disciplines, I can't really say philosophy plays a big role, and so do a lot of theory, because a lot of this stuff we don't know the facts on. The impact of CO2 on the environment we know has damaging effects, but we don't know how long in the future it's going to be or how long these impacts will be felt, even if we do reduce.
You mean philosophy in terms of it being an ethical issue?
Yeah, so right now our generations would be, a lot of the forecasts are for our generation. So that would come into play, the ethics. How do we leave the land for our next generation to be able to provide for themselves, which is a key definition in sustainability.
Thank you.
So one of your points on this topic was using renewable sources
Sure.
and kind of their environmental impact.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't there a lot of controversy about the use of CFL lights and disposing of them properly, and the mercury that's involved in them? How would you combat or educate people?
There definitely is, and it's like anything else. There's a lot of benefits involved, but there's a lot of drawbacks too that you might not necessarily consider. CFLs are a great example. And what I would say is that the best way to make the best decision is through education. So CFL bulbs, there are programs for recycling these bulbs, but most people don't know about them because it's not readily available information. So my suggestion would be make the information more readily available, make it easily accessible. Because even in my house, I've had situations like CFL in Pacific where you just have these bulbs and you're holding them, you don't know what to do with them because there's no answer, there's nothing else to do. So I think education would be the biggest answer to that.
Jason, did you ask a question?
Yeah. Would you happen to know the lifespan of like a solar panel?
Yeah, so that's a major controversy too. A lot of the providers for the panels are saying like 20 years, 25 years. But I have family that are in the industry now that are seeing callbacks on panels as soon as 3 years, as soon as 4 years, which really hurts the payback period because you got to invest in fixing these things. A lot of times they're not warranty. They have stipulations to get them out of warranty. So I've seen panels last a lot longer and as short as 3 years.